Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this briefing. There'll be time for questions at the end, which you can either ask via the chat function on Zoom, or you can just ask by popping your video on, popping your hand up and asking that question. First of all, we'll hear from Professor Andrew Martin from UNSW Sydney, followed by Dr. Katrina Barker from Western Sydney University. Andrew, I'll pop over to you.
Thanks very much, Shannon, and thanks, guys, for joining. I guess, like Katrina, I'm an educational psychologist, and so I look at factors and processes relevant to how kids learn and how they are motivated and engaged. One thing that's particularly, I guess, salient over this time, we're seeing in some ways the largest educational experiment ever conducted at scale. We've moved from in-class learning to remote learning. And one feature of that is there's a lot of uncertainty in students' lives, and they're uncertain about how long they'll be out of school. They're uncertain about how they'll be assessed for the Year 12 students. They're uncertain about how they'll gain an ATAR. And a lot of them are uncertain about the learning platforms and ways of learning that they're now required to engage in. The downside of uncertainty is that it can lead to a sense that you don't have much control over things, and a lack of control can lead to helplessness and disengagement. Because if you follow the logic, if you genuinely believe you don't have much say over things or not much control over your situation, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to keep trying, because you see that as a somewhat pointless exercise when so much is beyond your control. So this sense of uncertainty has a major implications for students' motivation, engagement and learning. So a response to that is to encourage students to focus on the things that are in their control. And there are three big things in their control. The first is effort, how hard students try, that's in their control. The second is strategy, the way students try. So how they go about their study, how they go about listening to the teacher when they're in sort of face-to-face online, how they interact with their peers online, how they engage with the learning management systems that they're now living in. And the third thing is attitude. You do control how you think about your situation, including this COVID-19. You do control your attitude to the tasks the teachers assigned, the nature of the online learning and remote learning that's happening. So the more students focus on these three controllable things, effort, strategy and attitude, they'll feel a little more in the driver's seat. And when they feel a little more in the driver's seat, they'll feel more motivated, engaged and will persist longer. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much for that, Andrew. We'll now pop over to Katrina, who is from Western Sydney University. Thanks, Katrina.
Good morning. So my background is educational psychology, and I oversee the Master of Teaching Primary at Western Sydney University and teach in the unit Educational Psychology. And I would just like to compliment a lot of what Andrew has talked about this morning, in particular, that getting the young people to understand and perceive that there are some advantages to working remotely and online, things like that it's non-linear, it's flexible, self-paced. So even though they might feel a sense of lack of control, if we're talking to them about, in fact, you can actually have a lot of control over your learning through investing in a number of strategies that will be really useful for them. So in particular, when we're looking at psychological needs and well-being, there's probably three that come to mind in terms of self-determination theory. They're autonomy, relatedness and competence. So the three strategies that I've drawn from relate particularly to those three core functions. So in terms of autonomy and building on Andrew's comment about having control, the idea of self-regulation and time management. So the strategy of being able to set a timetable for the day, pick and choose which elements of the learning that they're going to engage in for that day, how and when that's going to occur, so that they build in breaks, so that reward time, that they've sat down, they've done it, they reward themselves, is a great motivator for young people. in terms of relatedness, one of the downsides of remote learning is that it can be quite isolating. And so a great motivational strategy is to manufacture social groups. So I've done this with my daughter in homeschooling, where we've got dedicated time, not every day, but over a couple of days, to reconnect with friends, but to catch up on learning and what they're doing in terms of their learning and their progress, sharing what they've discovered to make it exciting and fun and novel. So it's a particularly important strategy given how important social connections are, and working from home remotely does have a tendency to undermine that possibility. But there are video conferencing tools that are highly recommended, and that's certainly something that I'd endorse. And in terms of competence, that the sense of being capable and being able to seek mastery is a really important need. And so one of the ways to do that is to make sure that the young person is submitting their work and getting feedback from their teachers, and asking the teachers for feedback, because this is new for teachers as well. So, it's okay to ask for feedback and check in with the teachers. They're there to support the young people, and that will give them confidence that they're on the right track, and that their learning is on the right trajectory, and give them some motivation to continue. So those clear goals will be really important for feeding back into their timetables for the next week.
Excellent. Thank you very much, both of you, for those contributions. Something that comes to mind for me as a parent who is doing this schooling from home malarkey at the moment is, as a parent, how much should we be driving that work for our children? How much focus should we be having on, this is what you need to be doing, this is what the teachers sent home, and how much should we be saying to them, this is actually an opportunity for you to develop some of those skills yourself, to do that self-direction? Because for me, I'm finding that a very tricky balancing act, where I don't want to be on their case the whole time. I'm looking at it and saying to them, well, I've finished my schooling, this is an opportunity for you to choose about how you want yours to go, but what's the right balance there for parents?
Katrina, do you want to go?
Well, I think it is certainly age dependent, that younger children will need a lot more support than older children. I've got a 5-year-old who can't read. So it is total dependence on the parent to set them up with the learning experiences and give them an opportunity to practice and master. As children age, you can remove that structure. And I would imagine that a lot of the groundwork has already been set up with parents and their young children or adolescents in those initial weeks where they were just starting to get into a routine. But certainly it is a very important skill set that they're able to develop, and that we're able to support them to develop that sense of being able to self-regulate. Because we know in psychology, self-regulation is a very challenging construct to build and develop. And so what we do as parents to support them to develop that skill set is really critically important.
Yeah, I'd agree with Katrina, and I'd also, I guess, it could be a bit of a long journey. This remote learning, we're not sure when things are coming, when we're getting back to schools, and so certainly in my experience, the relationship between parent and child is pretty key, and so it may be that you'll need to pace it in terms of how much you drive your child. And so you don't want to push it so hard that they become resistant and won't do anything with or for you. And so sometimes the philosophy, 60% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And so that relationship will see you over time. Katrina's right, it will depend on the age of the child, but also depends, but even some older kids, if they've got particular, so for example, kids with ADHD who have self-regulation issues may need a bit more structure and input from parents, even in high school. And so I think getting that balance right between applying a bit of gentle pressure and direction, but not at the expense of the relationship where the shutters come down and kids won't do anything for you. And so getting that, and that may depend day to day, week to week, and certainly child to child in the family.
Now, we've had a teacher ask a question about whether either of you have any tips on how to change or influence attitudes of their students when those students are working remotely and they're not doing the face-to-face in the classroom work with them. So would either of you like to draw on that?
Could I just ask, could you repeat the question? I didn't, the change in what?
For a teacher who is working with their students remotely, how might they change or influence the motivation of their students when they are not in the classroom with them?
Yeah, and so getting a good balance between a bit of face-to-face, assigning work that is differentiated for children in the classroom, and so sometimes one size does not fit all. It may be a little more, some individualised instruction for some children, depending on where they're at, and I think also where they can stay in touch with the home to just check that there, what issues might be going on there. There may indeed be a quarantine happening at that home, or there might be children might be unwell, or there might be a lot of kids in the home. So I think that differentiated approach and teachers staying in touch with children and their situation is important over this time.
Hmm. Certainly, the face-to-face interaction is so important, and regularly as well, that the students know that they're there, because when you're online, you don't know that somebody's behind there or somebody's actually is still attending to the task. So hence the feedback, getting feedback, and teachers being really responsive to students when they post a question, that they get the feedback quite quickly. A turnaround time is so important, so that they know that somebody's there and listening, and that's very comforting and motivational for the young people as they're studying. Yeah, and certainly we did a survey with our students, and the video conferencing and the seeing of somebody is critically important, and not just lots of online tasks. And I think that that's really problematic at the moment, that I'm noticing, is that a lot of the learning is, fill out this PDF form and print it out and do it. There's a lot of written work, but the teachers coming in and teaching and running sessions that complement the doing tasks of children and young people is really important as well.
Yeah, talking to some students, we can't underestimate how important it is for them to see their teacher's face. And so there's various levels of that. Some teachers will conduct a whole lesson face-to-face. Some teachers will just orient them for about 5 or 10 minutes face-to-face, and then let the students get back to it. And then at the end of the lesson, the teacher parachutes in face-to-face again. And some teachers are doing a pre-record video just to orient them with instructions. So there's different ways of doing it. So if you can, students seem to be appreciating it.
We've had another question come up here. How will the introduction of ABC Me broadcasting education lessons from April the 14th help or hinder students?
Well, that's a good question. It just depends on how it's being used, is my point. If teachers aren't valuing it and using it, then it's essentially a tool for parents. And maybe that's a really important element, because I think we've focused a lot on young people and students, and teachers, but there's also the element of parents, and parents now becoming teachers, and parents, a lot of them are still working while having homeschooling. So it might be an opportunity for parents to use that as a tool to, okay, go and watch the ABC program, and then the parents initiate an activity based on what they've been viewing. So at least it gives some respite to parents to be able to, catch up on emails or do some work-oriented experiences. But unless teachers know what the predicted programs are going to be, and there's a regular approach to them, then they can tap into that as an additional resource that has a lot of utility.
Yeah, and certainly any of these programs that have good educational rigor about them, and fairly closely aligned with syllabus means that kids at the other side of this will be able to keep up. But also you need to just be careful of set and forget programs where we just press the play button, because we do know that learners can be very different, and so these sorts of programs may be actually a source of of interaction between parent or carer and child, and also give the parent and the carer some ideas. So I certainly would be keeping an eye on the student as they're going about these, so we're not adopting set and forget approaches to instruction over this time.
Now, someone's asked a question about whether there are any papers recommended regarding motivation that exist out there. There are a whole heap of papers, and we're actually preparing a briefing paper at Masira where we'll compile a bit of a bibliography for people about the topics that we're covering in our webinars. So that will be available in the next week or two. I realise that we're getting very close to running out of time. One other quick question, where we're talking about using video conferencing and different platforms. There's a question about how you make the decision between the risks of student privacy and data security with engaging people as students over video conferencing. Would either of you like to very quickly speak to that one before we wrap up?
I'm aware that the Department of Education have particularly supported Zoom as their tool, and it is password protected, and teachers have to allow access to students in their class. So it is password protected, and it's a feature that the department have purchased.
Andrew, do you?
Yeah, I think also just again being mindful that the parents and carers are at home, and so I think that's another aspect of where privacy and security and child safety, the risks are mitigated when there's more of a shared environment over this period.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you both very much, and thank you everyone for attending today. We'll wrap this up. This recording will be made available through our social media channels I was going to say in the next day or so, given that tomorrow is Good Friday, we might push out till next week. I hope everyone has a very happy and safe Easter, and thank you very much to our experts for your input today. Goodbye.
Thanks very much.